Yes, we'll only answer the one question once.
I have a question. I have a question.
What were they thinking?
Go ahead.
We're not going to answer that question, are we?
No.
Yes, Larry, do you have a question?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
It's for the three august gentlemen who are here at the front. Does this mean that Apple is getting out of the Pro market?
Is that one of the questions?
It's about half of the questions. What do you mean? Is it one of the questions?
Okay. Well, if we get through all those questions, we'll actually open it up to you, for a little bit of feedback. Yeah. However, understand this though: if you do stand up and ask a question, and if you may be on film, because we're taping this whole show tonight, and we're putting it up on YouTube. And so, put your makeup on before you ask your question.
I just want to say, Mike, on behalf of that question that Larry asked, and many of you may be inclined to ask, we do not know what's going on in the mind of Apple, the Borg. We can't answer what they're going to do. We can't answer, are they going to do this? Are they going to add that? We can't. We don't know these things. We can guess. I know Philip has been getting these, feeds from Steve Bays saying, we're going to add this, we're going to add that, but we don't know when. Sure, they're going to do everything. Eventually we're not going to need to edit at all. We're just going to stare at the computer and our movies will come out. But we can't tell you.
We're working on that. Okay. At assisted editing, we're working on that.
All right, well, there you go. Anyway, I'm just saying, we're not going to be able to answer those questions, so please don't bother asking.
Yeah, I think.
But I do have, I think, an important point, and it's the reason I asked the question. And the important point is that it's too early to make a decision.
Absolutely.
It's just too early. The product has been out for 5 days. It's clearly polarized the entire community, both pro and con. Apple, as is their wont, look what happened with the iPhone 4 and the antenna issue. They take all this feedback back, they talk about it, and then they decide they're going to make one of three decisions. Decision number one is they're going to answer and they're going to say, this is what we're doing, this is when it's going to be done, this is what you can expect. So that gives us something. Or they're going to say, we're not doing any of it. They're going to give us a no, they're not interested, that tells us something. Or they're not going to say anything. And when you think about that, that tells us something as well. But this is still the time when Apple is reflecting on how they want to respond. And I find it extremely premature for anybody to say, well, I'm going to make a career-changing decision and jump to a different platform or not jump. It's too soon. It's just too soon. My philosophy is wait a month. In a month, we're going to know. We're not going to have new software. It's way too fast for a new version to come out. But we'll have guidance one way or the other. Philip.
I was just going to say that in a conference call with two product managers this morning, I asked this question specifically because when you're designing software, you have a user case in mind. We do it all the time, and I can pretty much tell you the names of the people that each of our 13 pieces of software were actually made for. Transcriptize, for example, was made for Larry. We sell it to other people as well, but really it was Larry that we had in mind. It was his need. So I specifically asked, what is the use case? Who is the user for Final Cut Pro 10? Who did you have in mind? The response I got is the vast majority of our Final Cut 7 customers. Our vast majority of our Final Cut Pro 7 professional editing customers. But if you're working in broadcast television, episodic television, and studio film, right now, Final Cut Pro 10 is not a suitable application for you to even think about using in those contexts. And I would not like to predict one way or the other whether or not it is going to ever be suitable for that type of customer. Wait and see, because you're not making career decisions, business decisions within the first month, within the first 6 months. Final Cut Studio 3 or earlier did not suddenly get raptured off your hard drive on June 21. It's going to keep working and keep working and keep working. It will probably work online. Just keep using it. How many people in this town are still making money with an Avid Meridian? See? Yeah. And how long has that been officially obsolete? Yeah. Okay, so now that's how long you can be using Final Cut 7, so you should feel better. Now let's get on to the practical questions.
Okay, and speaking of Lion, someone on the LAFCPUG forum installed Final Cut 7 on Lion and declared it working just quite well.
And I got the same message, which gets us to the first question. What Macintosh and operating system is needed for Final Cut Pro 10?
10.7, what are we on?
10.6.7, but
10.6.7 or better.
10.6.8 is highly recommended.
And if you go to apple.com/FinalCutPro/resources, there's a listing of everything that you need in terms of supported hardware and software. Philip, can transcriptions be easily imported to keywords or notes?
Can transcriptions? No, I'm sorry, they cannot. The note field is limited to 128 characters. No, it's a bit longer than that, but it has a limitation. It's not unlimited, so you couldn't fit a transcription in there. I'm looking at Gregory Clark, who's been poking around much more inside the programming innards of Final Cut Pro 10 in the last week. The question would be how to get it in there. Well, you can copy and paste it from something else and paste it into the field. But no, there is no easy way of generating a transcript or even associating a transcript with it other than simply putting in the keywords yourself.
Michael, can you still make custom buttons?
No, there is no button bar, and I'm glad.
Me too. Michael, but I know at least one of my customers won't be.
Michael, can you still copy and paste to remove attributes?
You cannot copy and paste attributes, and I'm not glad.
Sorry, you can copy and paste attributes, but you can't select the attributes that you paste.
Well, that's true.
Which is as good as not being there, in my opinion, because I'm not glad about that either.
Where's the paste effects? There's something called paste effects, but it's not as comprehensive as the previous paste attributes, and you can't specify which things. Can you drag effects?
Yes.
Yes, from the list in the what do you call it, inspector here, if you had a clip selected and it had an effect, not the built-in effects, but if you had a filter or something applied, you could drag it from one clip to another, yes.
And you can change the stacking order like we could in a filter tab, and you can drag more than one filter at a time. But it has to be a clip effect, as Michael said, not a built-in effect. I didn't hear.
Can you copy? I don't think so.
We should really stick to the... if we keep going out of this, the whole point of doing the paper is not going to work.
Are the function keys at all useful, Philip?
I didn't use the function key, so I don't have an answer to
The
that.
function keys have been turned off. So in Final Cut 7, we had access to the F keys. In Final Cut 10, they default to the operating system defaults, and we cannot program, nor can we access functions on the function keys.
You can actually use F10 and F11 to make your volume louder and quieter, though.
Michael, is that not an operating system function?
It is. I'm
okay,
kidding.
you're
Yes,
kidding?
I am kidding. It's an operating system function. I'm sorry, I should have specified.
But the same way that we might, it's highly likely we're going to get versioning once we get into a Lion version of this. The Lion has got versioning built on essentially the same foundation that Final Cut Pro 10 is built on. So I would expect in Lion, at least at the next update, that we'll get versioning. So that's a nice thing.
This one I'll take. What about those of us who do not want to switch? Will Final Cut 7 continue to be supported? The answer is no. Will it be upgraded? So far, the answer is no. And what happens when the
operating system?
Thank you. Operating system changes. Michael's already told us that Lion, which is 10.7, seems to support Final Cut Studio 3, so we should be okay moving forward to Lion. But the question has to be, why are you upgrading to Lion?
Yes.
Don't simply upgrade to Lion because it's released, especially don't upgrade to Lion when it is first released, for the same reason that you don't want to upgrade initially for a production system to Final Cut Pro 10. You got to give it time to stabilize. Apple will make changes to both the operating system and the application, but you got to give them time to do that. Should we all just switch to Avid? Well, I'm not, because I don't know how to use Avid.
No.
So it's premature. It's like, oh my goodness, there's a wave coming, maybe I should jump off the ship. We don't know if it's going to hit the ship yet. Let's just wait a minute. Just calm down, people. Calm down. The next question is picture-in-picture, distortion, effects, etc. How do keyframes work? Oh, this is so cool. Click on a clip. Okay, good. Now go up to the control-click on it. That'll work.
Oh, to open.
Video animation.
Yes.
They've changed. Remember how we had to do keyframes inside the motion tab or inside the filter tab? And we could do keyframe editing inside the timeline, but it was brain dead and stupid. Not that I have an opinion about this. Well, they've added video animation, so now here you can add any transitions can be keyframed, built-in effects can be keyframed, clip effects can be keyframed, and you select them all by selecting the clip. And for instance, by default, opacity is keyframeable, and you have access to all this keyframe control, so you can keyframe in the inspector, which is like the motion tab, or you have much more control by keyframing inside video animation for a video clip or audio animation for an audio clip. So you have keyframe control for all of this stuff. Philip, how do you import Final Cut Pro 7 existing projects or hand off from Final Cut 7 to Final Cut 10?
At this point in time, there is no way to go from Final Cut Pro 7 to Final Cut Pro 10. There is certainly a lot of evidence in the package that Apple tried to do that. But I think the reality is, and again, the answer from them is that the data structures are too different. There is nothing that approximates a project. The data structures are different. The way a timeline is built, there are no tracks.
It would have to create multiple events and multiple projects. And I mean, one Final Cut Pro 7 project would turn into 6 different files in Final Cut 10.
And if it wasn't perfect, Apple are going to get eviscerated. I think it's very interesting that one of the prominent voices who is thinking of going to Premiere Pro has been talking about the ease of going from Final Cut Pro 7 to Premiere Pro, is quite happy to accept that in that translation most of the effects don't work completely correctly, that titles don't translate, and there are a whole bunch of other limitations. If Apple did that sort of transfer with it, about 50% of what you had in Final Cut 7 would even attempt to translate just as a sequence into Final Cut Pro, a project in Final Cut Pro 10, and you only got one track and placeholders for titles and placeholders for effects. People would really rip into Apple if that was the case. If a third party does that, say Automatic Duck comes out with some sort of interpretation tool down the track, it is only going to be about 50% able to convert that. It's never going to be a one-to-one conversion. And it is much easier to go to Premiere Pro or to Media Composer because they have quite similar data structures. But Final Cut Pro 10 does not.
But Philip, you know XML better than any other living human being, with the possible exception of 2 people I think of off the top of my head. Can't you just do this with XML?
XML that would be like, can't you do something with text? Can't you convert a Robert Grisham novel into a technical training manual using text? Well, I mean, in theory.
Motion 3, actually, that manual, it reads a little bit like a...
Well, Motion 3 is pretty weird because it's it is an XML text file and a QuickTime movie at the same time. No, you can't. The XML is simply a representation of a data structure. In Final Cut 7, it's a representation of the data structures that are in the Final Cut Pro 7 project file, which is a binary format. So even though they have an XML representation of that, and even though I expect at some future time that we'll be able to import and export XML from Final Cut Pro 10, it will be a completely different form of XML. As different, in fact, as the Premiere Pro project format is, because Premiere Pro is also an XML project format. Motion is an XML project format, at least in 3 and 4. Just because it's XML, it doesn't mean it's the same XML, and so the answer is no. And the reason why we can import iMovie projects is that they are already in the same data structures. And this version of iMovie was originally designed by Randy Ubilis as a producer's pre-edit tool to feed off to the editor.
Go on, sorry.
Michael, is there a way to reverse match frame?
No, there's not even a real match frame. There is something called show in browser. Typically match frame, whatever clip is under the playhead, if I put my clip under the play it over a clip, I could load that clip up into the event browser. In this case, I cannot. What I can do is a show in browser rather, which will not work on that clip here. Really, it does work sometimes. Show in.
I wonder if it's because you've got so many connected clips that it's really a sequence rather than a clip.
That's a compound clip there, and that's why I was wondering. But there we go. So Shift F will work to load the clip into the viewer, but there's no way to do a reverse to find out where this clip is used or find the frame in this clip that's used in the project. So it's somewhat limited. It's certainly more limited than Final Cut 7.